You know what really grinds my gears? When politicians make claims that sound amazing on paper but leave you with more questions than answers. And today we're diving into one of those head scratchers coming out of Lake County, Illinois. Here's the setup. Holly Kim, the Lake County treasurer, has been touting this brilliant investment strategy where she puts county money to work. It earns interest and supposedly uses that money to cover the expenses of her own office. Sounds pretty genius, right? No taxpayer burden, just smart money management. But here's the thing, when you start pulling on that thread, the whole sweater might just unravel. Let me paint you the picture of what we're dealing with here. Holly Kim took office as Lake County treasurer in 2018, and to her credit, she came in with some big ideas about modernizing the office and generating revenue. According to her own announcements, she increased investment income, and the office is reporting generating millions of dollars in interest revenue from investing property tax dollars. Now, on the surface, this sounds fantastic. Who doesn't want their government making smart investments that generate returns? But here's where my alarm bells start ringing a bit, and here's where you should start maybe asking some questions too. First, what exactly does it mean when she says this investment income pays for the expenses of her office? Because here's the reality. According to her own press releases, that investment income doesn't actually go to the treasurer's office budget. It gets distributed to 284 local taxing bodies across Lake County. We're talking schools, libraries, fire districts, municipalities. All these different government entities get a slice based on their tax levy. So right off the bat, there's a disconnect between the claim and the reality. The investment earnings aren't covering the salaries and operating expenses of the treasurer's office. They're being distributed out to other government agencies, which is fine. That's actually how the system is supposed to work. But don't tell taxpayers that your office is funding itself when that's not actually happening, maybe at all. Second question, and this is the big one, how exactly is this money being invested? Because every investment involves risk, every single one. I spent a decade as a portfolio and investment manager. If you want higher returns, you take on more risk. That's just finance 101. Holly Kim has been using something called the Public Funds Investment Act to justify these investments. But what does that actually mean in practice? Is this money in treasury bonds, corporate bonds, stocks, a diversified portfolio, some sort of fixed annuity from an insurance company? We don't know because the details aren't readily available to the public. And here's what's particularly concerning. She mentioned that the office's portfolio had the best year on record and was well positioned to benefit from a rate declining environment because she locked in much higher interest rates over the past year. Now, for those of you who don't understand how bonds work, you know what that means. When interest rates go down, bond prices go up. That sounds great. But it also means there was significant interest rate risk in that portfolio. What if rates had gone up instead of down? What would have happened to the value of those investments? We're talking about taxpayer money here, property tax collections that belong to the school districts and fire districts and libraries. How much risk is acceptable when you're playing with public funds? Third question. Who's managing these investments and what are they getting paid? The Public Funds Investment Act requires counties to have investment policies. But was there a competitive bidding process to find the best asset manager at the lowest cost? What are the management fees? What's the conflict of interest policy? These are standard questions for any institutional investor, but good luck finding these answers on the Lake County website. Fourth question, and this is where it gets really interesting. What happens when the county needs that cash? Property tax money comes in at specific times of the year, and it needs to be distributed to those 284 taxing bodies on a regular schedule. If the money is invested in bonds or other securities, it's not sitting in a checking account ready to be written out as checks. So there has to be a liquidity management strategy. What is it? How do they ensure that they can meet their obligations? What's the backup plan if they need to sell investments at an inopportune time? And here's the kicker. The part that really confuses me. If the county has been so successful at generating investment income, if the county is making millions of dollars from these smart investments, then why did property taxes in Lake County go up so significantly in the recent years and have plans to continue increasing them significantly over the next few years? Let's talk about what actually happened to property taxes. While Kim was announcing record investment returns, Lake County property tax owners were getting hammered. Some areas saw tax increases over 10% in a single year. Some districts saw spending go up by more than 10%. The county itself raised its property tax levy by 5% for fiscal year 2024 after not raising it for 4 years. Now, I'm not saying investment income would completely offset property tax increases. That's not how the system really works. Property taxes are driven by the spending requests from local taxing bodies. But here's my point. If those investments are successful, if we're generating millions in additional revenue, shouldn't that be providing at least some relief to taxpayers? Shouldn't schools and libraries and fire districts be saying, hey, we got this extra investment income, so we don't need to increase our levy as much? Instead, what we're seeing is the opposite. Taxes going up by record amounts and up even more over the next few years. Illinois already has the highest property tax burden in the entire nation. Lake County residents pay over $6,200 on average compared to the national average of less than $3,000. That's more than double the national average. And look, I get it. There were some special circumstances. Some school districts lost access to property tax relief grants in 2024, which made it look like spending was increasing when they were really just going back to normal levels after temporary relief. Inflation was running at 3.4%, giving local governments some justification to raise their spending. But even accounting for all of that, we're still seeing tax bills rising faster than inflation, faster than economic growth, faster than most people's wage increases. So here's what I think might be going on, and this is where the controversy comes in. Holly Kim has absolutely increased investment returns compared to previous treasurers. That's probably true, maybe. The county hasn't really provided any data to show or prove it yet. She's probably been more aggressive about investing funds instead of letting them sit in low-interest checking accounts. And in a rising interest rate environment like we saw from 2018 to 2023, that strategy paid off. But the claim that this is some kind of revolutionary approach that's alleviating the tax burden on residents, that sounds like classic political spin. The investment income is a drop in the bucket compared to the overall property tax collections. Lake County collects well over $1 billion in property taxes every year. Even $10 million in investment income, which would be a great year, represents less than 1% of that total. Here's the uncomfortable truth that nobody wants to say out loud. When you're taking more risk to generate higher investment returns, you're gambling with public money. Maybe it pays off like it did during the period when interest rates were rising, but what happens in the next downturn? What happens if there's a market correction and those bond values drop? Are taxpayers going to be stuck covering the losses? The other piece of this that bothers me is the lack of transparency. For someone who claims to have increased transparency in the treasurer's office, it's remarkably difficult, near impossible, to find detailed information about the investment strategy, the specific holdings, the risk management approach, and the performance attribution. Most institutional investors, pension funds, endowments, even state treasuries, publish detailed investment reports. They show you the asset allocation, the benchmarks, the returns, the fees. Where's that information for Lake County? I tried to access the Lake County investment policy document, and guess what? Access denied. The link returns a 403 error. Now, maybe that's just a technical glitch, but it's symbolic of the broader problem. If you're going to tout your investment prowess, if you're going to make it a centerpiece of your political identity, then you need to be completely transparent about what you're doing with the taxpayer money. And let's talk about the political angle here, because Holly Kim is now running for Illinois Comptroller. Her campaign website is full of talking points about her investment success as the Lake County treasurer, how she secured record investment earnings of over $3 million in a single year, and how these earnings went directly back to schools, libraries, and essential services. That all may be technically true, but it's presented in a way that makes it sound like she's personally saving taxpayers' money. The reality is far more complex. Yes, the investment income may be providing additional revenue to local governments, but those same local governments are still raising property taxes at rates that far exceed the investment returns. So the net effect for taxpayers is still negative. Look, I'm not saying Holly Kim is doing anything illegal or unethical or untoward. What I am saying is that a simple narrative doesn't really match a portfolio management reality, and voters deserve to know the full story. If you're investing public funds more aggressively to generate higher returns, you need to be completely transparent about the risks, the strategy, the costs, and the governance structure. You need to show taxpayers exactly how much additional revenue was generated, what it was used for, and how it compares to the additional property tax burden they're shouldering. You also need to acknowledge that investment returns are not a magic solution to rising property taxes. The real drivers of property tax increases are spending decisions by local governments, school districts hiring more staff, pension obligations, infrastructure projects moving forward. Investment income at best can provide a small cushion, but it's not going to fundamentally change the trajectory of property taxes in a high tax state like Illinois. Here's the bottom line. Lake County residents are paying some of the highest property taxes in the nation, and those taxes continue to rise at rates well above inflation. At the same time, the treasurer is touting impressive investment returns, but isn't providing in plain English or in detailed reporting how it's benefiting taxpayers. The investment income gets distributed to local taxing bodies. Those same entities keep raising levies year after year. Something doesn't add up. Either the investment strategy isn't as successful as claimed, or the benefits are being overstated, or there's a fundamental disconnect between generating investment income and actually providing property tax relief. And that's what the taxpayers should be demanding answers to. Not just accepting the press releases at face value, but actually digging into the details and asking the tough questions, because at the end of the day, it's our money, and you deserve to know exactly what's being done with it.